lusapho lwakho, morena buka sitshaba sakho, uferisele intwali maswenye, usibuluke, usibuluke, sitshaba sakho, South Africa, e diplofano senyemel, e didifano sie, oren sevechebe, vorikroze and vorje, so the cause to come together and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa.
Thank you so much for that. As we start this very important program, I'd like to reflect as part of my opening gambit, where I'd like us to reflect on the week that was for the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Maybe I should start off by introducing myself. My name is Sello Hatang, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I thought I should just reflect on the week that was, in terms of some of the work that we did with the government, with some of the key stakeholders, our donors, in order to just paint a picture for you of what this week means for us. We know that for all of you, this week means a lot, and you have given everything to make sure that we succeed. This week is about, and particularly this event, is about us as the Nelson Mandela Foundation saying, we thank you. Thank you very much for your support during that time when it was tough and we thought we wouldn't be able to make it through. We say this not only on our own behalf, but on behalf of the other legacy organizations and the Mandela family. And I'd like to, at this point, also welcome the Mandela family here present and say that all of us are still with you as you continue to mark this important moment. This week for us, we also decided with the Department of Social Development that we will have a book drive, in line with the Mandela Day messaging that we had, where we wanted to focus on 3 issues. And some of the partners that we have, such as KFM, are dealing with the issue of shelter, for example, because there would be houses that would be given away tomorrow. We're hoping that that will continue. Some of our partners will continue to deal with the issue of food security. And we hope that, again, as we mark this milestone, we say continue with that message. But the book drive is about ensuring that we take the message from Madiba to heart. The last time Madiba was in this office, it was in this room where there was a child who came through, and Madiba, it was 10 o'clock in the morning when he was receiving a delegation, and there was a child with that who came with that group. And Madiba didn't even care about the others who were there, who were big celebrities. And he started asking this child, why aren't you at school? Shouldn't you be in school? What grade are you in? What's your name? And all those details that I think the parents would have been in trouble if Madiba could have made the call. But it reminds me that Madiba thought education was very important. And may we continue to support endeavors to make sure that all of us support education. That's why the book drive, we're saying, as you reminisce about Madiba, reminisce with the future in mind, because we don't owe it to the past of what Madiba did, but the future that we can say to those who are still to be born, this is what we did. The question that we keep asking is, where were you when Madiba passed? But an even more significant question should be, where are you today to help preserve that legacy? I'd like to also remind you that this week we also traveled to Mauritius, and I can promise you that it was not for holiday, but because the people of Mauritius thought it important to mark Madiba's legacy, his year of passing. And they declared this week a Nelson Mandela Memorial Week, the only country to have done that. And we believe that with the work that they did and the message that they asked me to convey back to you, that they know that the struggles for inequality, the struggle against inequality continues. Because as much as we see Mauritius as a very prosperous country, they do have those problems. Issues of poverty, issues of discrimination, and may we continue to also work hard here. And they are saying they are with us. As I reflect on the week that was, I'd like to again just urge you to, as you do your bit in terms of social media, that you remember that there's a message, part of the message that we're passing on is about living the legacy, that we make sure that we try and live the legacy. I'd like to, at this point, ask you to please join me as we watch a tribute video on Nelson Mandela. Looks like you're not going to.
Mandela was a pillar. He's the man who gave us freedom. And then you look at the country now with the changes, and he's an embodiment of peace.
For Madiba. As that's in the picture, we are here today to bid you farewell, and we're going to continue your work. With all the children, we'll take care of them, make sure all the men are involved. Peace.
Mandela to me is a great father because he is a father to the whole world.
Video again.
He has taught us so much. He left
Mandela was a pillar. He's the man who gave us freedom. And then you look at the country now with the changes, and he's an embodiment of peace.
For Madiba. As that's in the picture, we are here today to bid you farewell, and we're going to continue your work. With all the children, we'll take care of them, make sure all the men are involved. Peace.
Mandela to me great father because he is a father to the whole world. He has taught us so much. He left us with great values: respect, forgiveness, and love.
Honor to me embodies the nation, embodies what South Africa has become, and embodies the future. So it's sort of just, it's there for all people, and there's a leader, and I think he's a symbol and an icon that can just bring the country together.
Here to say a lot to Papa Mandela, to say to him that we love him and that he will stay always with us.
Thank you very much. I can have my guests back up. If you can please get back to your places. They will pull this up. This is actually embarrassing to be doing this in front of the Minister of Science and Technology. But we were just showing you what we need, Minister. Because we know that you have deep pockets and you'll be able to supply. So let me thank you again. I'd like to at this point call on the Chief Executive of EDCON, who tells me that he has a very important announcement also to make as part of his speech. I'm not putting under pressure, I hope, because you told me a few days ago.
The good thing is you're not changing. So sorry for my German English. So if I say any names very wrong, please forgive me. So obviously, first of all, welcome, and want to thank and greet the Honorable Minister Nelly Pandor. Was that good? Good. And we obviously want to thank and welcome all the ministers, deputy ministers, the chairman of the trustees of the foundation, the Nelson Mandela family, obviously, and all honorable guests. So we got involved with the foundations some time ago. And obviously we are deeply honored to be here today. And I speak in the name of 40,000 people, 40,000 employees, and we are only very humble that we have the chance to speak here. Even we only allowed, based on Shello, to speak for exactly 3 minutes. So it's a little bit hard, obviously, in 3 minutes to express the gratitude to a man who obviously was the biggest son of this nation and without any question was the biggest leader of this nation. And without any question was one of the biggest leaders in the world. So what we just want to do, we want to obviously thank him for all his humility, for all his charm, his wit, his forcefulness, his pragmatism. We at ADCON, when we talk about him and we have our internal fights and discussions, we always refer to him. And honestly, there's one sentence in our company which we always use. We always say, you know, he was the man on which shoulders you can stand and you can rely on and you can really discuss and debate. So, without any question, he was the man, and you know, I can only judge it as a foreigner who he really gave everything for this nation without any question. And supposedly he gave more than he had to give. There's also no question on this one. And I think in times like this where the whole world is a little bit in a crisis and the whole world is economically and socially and politically challenged, I think it's very, very important that we believe that we always have to remember him, but we always have to combine him with, I think, a saying of, we all know the saying from J.F. Kennedy, which says, you know, ask not your country what you can do for you, ask what you can do for the country. And I think in a Madiba way, it's not only what you can do for the country, really act. So in line with this action, Shella put me a little bit under pressure, and I promise you it's not because of the technical incidents in the beginning. We think what we can do, I mean, the past is the past, so what can we do going forward? And we think the association is a wonderful association. And therefore what we decided, and our chairman personally decided, as his own contribution, that he for next year want to match last year's donation in order that you can do the best to preserve the most important legacy in this country. And we want to just say thank you to, I call him Mr. Mandela, forgive me for that, and we want to thank the association for whatever you did for us. Thank you.
It's 5 million, right?
He's negotiating the terms already.
Look, I was just trying to check how much is the matching. So am I at fault for that? No, I have to check. I think it was 10, but I'll just confirm outside of this room.
It's a proper amount.
No, thank you very much, Jürgen. What Jürgen didn't mention is that this exhibition that you're seeing was due to their contribution, that they made it possible. One of the partners who has been a partner throughout, who has walked with us through this journey, has been the SABC. What the SABC has done over the years, as they were preparing for the moment, and when they were even coming to us for archival footage and things like that, they became a strong partner. And at this point, I'd like to call on our partner for this exhibition and for many other work, the other projects that we've done, on Jimmy Matthews, to come and say a few words.
Good evening. Good evening to all of you. And, you know, I'm just a journalist. I'm just a hack. I'm just the guy behind the camera. So I don't know what the protocols are. I don't know, you know, the minister and I've informally known each other for a long time. And I'm never really sure what the formalities are. So I'm going to skip all of that. I'm going to fall back on that wonderful South African cop-out, which is all protocols observed, and I think that gets me through this. Because I'm, as I said, because I'm a journalist, I tend to put things down on paper, and I see that I've got 30 minutes, and since grade 1, my teachers used to say, you know, he's okay, he does okay at school, but he talks excessively. And this has followed me through my life, so I'm going to just touch on a few things. Death, even when we expect it, always comes as a shock. The SABC spent years preparing for the inevitable passing of Nelson Mandela. We had plans for every eventuality and teams ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. But until it happened, we could not foresee the full extent and the impact of it all. I was stuck in Pietermaritzburg with some SABC executives when I received the dreaded call. The only scheduled flights back to Johannesburg were the following day. It was truly a dark and a rainy night, with thick mist swirling through the vegetation. It was, however, impossible for me to even contemplate staying overnight, and so in true South African style, we hired a taxi, a typical minibus taxi, and set off through the pouring rain back to Auckland Park. My phone battery ran flat as I tried to coordinate the broadcast through the night. Made all the more difficult because I was directing proceedings, blind as it were. It was surreal to pull up into petrol stops along the way and to hear the SABC radio broadcasting the sad news. Eventually we got back to Johannesburg at 6:30 in the morning and proceeded straight to the newsroom. In the days that followed, the SABC rose to the challenge of one of the biggest broadcast efforts ever. For 10 days, across 4 television channels, 18 radio stations, and numerous digital platforms, the SABC had rolling, non-stop coverage of events related to the passing of Madiba. The task of broadcasting the event was all the more difficult for some staff members who over the years had developed their own personal relationship with our national icon. I, for one, had been outside the prison when he was released, and at Bishop's Court the following morning, a witness to Madiba's first press conference as a free man. I was at the first FNB Stadium rally. All these and many other events are fresh in my memory, as if it were yesterday. And now I was responsible for broadcasting our hero's final journey. We were acutely aware of the fact that this was not just news as usual. This was a milestone of our young democracy. We had a duty to honor his legacy, and we consciously did it every day to the best of our ability. Throughout the 10 days of mourning, the SABC continuously received messages on social media about its coverage of this historic event. At 6:20 on the morning of Nelson Mandela's funeral, a tweet on SABC News Online, and I quote, "I'm already awake to witness history. Thanks SABC for updating us with everything about the funeral. Hashtag rest in peace Nelson Mandela." A minute before that at SABC News Online, "If it wasn't for the SABC, I wouldn't have witnessed this greatest farewell of Madiba. I've never seen anything like that." This kind of coverage does not happen by chance. It requires years of meticulous planning. Other media houses had reported about the SABC's preparations and how much went into it, but I don't think they will ever fully comprehend the amount of dedication and love that went into preparing for that sad duty we had to perform. The official announcement of Nelson Mandela's death by the President of the Republic was simultaneously broadcast on all our platforms. Our digital platforms literally exploded as the world heard the news and responded with an outpouring of sorrow. We covered the news of Madiba's passing blow by blow, broadcasting live on radio and television the massive events like the memorial service and the funeral, and also streaming it live on the web. And I can go into some of the other detail, but I'll skip that. I want to maybe share with you a digital user who identified herself simply as Christelle wrote the following poem on a page created for this specific purpose on our news website. "I stand tall so that the light streams in and covers me. My window with its bars is small and my space is dark. But inside I'm free as I hear within me the echoes of Africa. We are a nation of strength, power, and a love within us. Hear its echoes as it travels across the universe. See its length as it echoes Africa. Stand tall within your space. Grab those echoes as you pace. Listen and feel the pulse of Africa." For Nelson Mandela. Today we are here to officially hand over an invaluable repository of insight into the coverage of the passing of Nelson Mandela. The SABC material we are donating to this center includes the items on the DVD that the SABC News handed over to the Mandela family, such as the radio obituary, a 1-hour TV highlights package, and a selection of online coverage. We are also donating a DVD that was prepared for commercial distribution. Images used on the SABC TV set during the 10-day special broadcast last year. A batch of 16,000 emails received by SABC News, and in cooperation with Telkom, audio messages from the public, some of which were broadcast in all our languages on SABC radio stations. This material is intended to help educate future generations about what it was like to be a South African in December 2013. It is meant to shed at least some light on the sorrow of a nation and the impact that one man had on the world. The dedicated SABC Nelson Mandela website is still there as a living tribute to him. It contains latest news related to him, as well as information on his legacy, TV and radio coverage of his mourning period, and it will also feature our special radio and TV coverage of this and many other events to reflect on Madiba's passing a year ago. I know personally how much blood, sweat and tears went into compiling the material we are now handing over to you. It was a labor of love for the hundreds of SABC News employees across the country and the world. We are also grateful to the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Center of Memory for their help and collaboration over the years to compile some of the material, and their assistance now to make sure that the SABC material will be preserved for future generations. I was going to share with you some of the responses we received from broadcast partners around the world during that 10-day period. But I think I'll tell you from the European Broadcast Union, we received the following. Your team's news coverage and production of the pool signal that was distributed throughout the world was literally flawless. The EBU was able to distribute over 70 hours of live transmissions for the 10 days. I sincerely thank you on behalf of Eurovision News for the great professionalism in managing the event day by day. From another broadcast partner, may I thank you very much for the work the SABC did on behalf of the millions of people around the world who wish to share in the recent events surrounding the death of Mr. Mandela. And then Doreen Morris, she's a friend, so I expect her to say nice things, but Doreen Morris emailed huge kudos to SABC News for the Madiba coverage, poignant, beautiful visuals, memories of an extraordinary life. And Jeffrey Dupe tweeted at SABC News Online, well done SABC for covering everything about Utata. I know that he's looking down with a smile and saying thank you. So thank you.
I'd like to at this point call on Vern Harris, who is the Director of Research and Archiving, to come and receive the donation from the SABC of the archival material. I'm going to invite Jimmy again back on the mic. I hope you noted how Jimmy did it. He said, I was going to tell you this, but I'm not going to do so because there's a note here saying 3 minutes. So I agree with your teacher. You're very good, but you go too long. I'd like to also call on one of the close friends of this foundation, both in his personal capacity and in his capacity as chairman of Telkom. Ndade Mabuza has been supportive of this center, and you will see there's a booth outside, a telephone booth, from which you can listen to messages, and that was made possible by Telkom. It has some images that go with it, so I'd like to call on Ndade Mabuza to come and say a few words.
I'm short enough, it's okay. Silo and the foundation, thank you very much. Mama, Michelle, good evening. The Mandela family, Deputy Judge President, I don't know you informally, so just in case we meet in a different way, I greet you, Judge President. Minister and all protocol observed. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad the taxi industry has been of help to bring Jimmy Matthews from Pietermaritzburg on time, even though your telephone from the other networks ran out of battery. We're here to celebrate and remember the life of one of South Africa's and indeed the world's greatest sons. On behalf of Telkom, I'm humbled and honored to be part of this tribute. Dr. Madiba has had a profound impact on people from all over the world. When the news of his passing spread through this time last year, condolence messages were sent from South Africa and beyond. In an attempt to capture the world's sentiment, Telkom, in partnership with the SABC and the Nelson Mandela Foundation, launched a phone-in service inviting members of the public to leave messages of tribute to Madiba in their home languages. Telkom provided the telephone lines for messages to be recorded in all of the 11 official languages in South Africa, making it easier for callers to leave their messages in languages of their choice. Apart from messages received in South Africa's 11 languages, there were also messages in Portuguese, French, Silozi, and Kiswahili, among others. All these messages have now been made available to the public via a classic public phone that has been installed at the tribute exhibition of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Now, everyone has the opportunity to listen to the tributes that were paid to former President Mandela. When you listen to the messages, you become aware of the impact he had on South Africa and the world and the people's admiration, respect, and love for him. These messages show that Madiba's legacy and impact on the world continue to live on and in the lives of people around the world. We have also taken some of these messages and displayed them on a wooden piece of artwork that Telkom would like to donate to the foundation to remind us all of the role he played in people's lives. I would like to conclude by sharing with you a message which was received from an Angolan and has been translated from Portuguese. I quote, "Rest in peace, Nelson Mandela. You will always be remembered by everyone. I believe everyone alive today will always remember your name. You are a great example for humanity. You changed us all, and although you have left us, you will always be alive among us. In our memories, in our hearts, I'm speechless. We love you. I love you, Nelson Mandela. Rest in peace." Before I take my seat, I would like to hand over to the foundation this wooden messages. Thank you very much. Silo.
I think it will be true to say, Prof, that that's how short people do it. I don't know where Jimmy comes from. So you can see that Ndate Mabuza lived up to the thing. So Jimmy, you're still short one, but just a little tall, I suppose, that's why. So I'd like to, at this point, one of the things we thought would be significant for all to witness and to come and see at the Nelson Mandela Foundation is the gun carriage. And when that moment came of Madiba's body being transferred from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape came, it was the military that did a good job of that. None of us will forget the jets, the fighter jets that were side by side with Madiba's plane as it took off. And I'd like to, at this point, call on one of our partners, Major General Feldman, to come and say a few words.
I was taught in the military that the moment you say all protocol observed, it means you didn't observe protocol. The Honorable Minister of Science and Technology, Naledi Pandor, the Chief Executive Officer of Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Deputy Judge President Mosineke, Mr. Selo Atang, Chief Executive Officer of EDCON, and Jürgen Schreiber, the Chairperson of Telkom, Mr. Jabu Mabuza, Professor Njabulo Ndebele, Ms. Judy Elliott, the SABC's Jimmy Matthews, and Mr. Vinnie Harris. Honorable guests and ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express the South African National Defence's gratitude towards the Mandela family, the Nelson Mandela Foundation and its associated entities for carrying forward the work of this real-life legend who helped shape the land of our forefathers into a united, non-racial society with peaceful coexistence between its citizens so that the future generations can live in an environment where equality prevails, devoid of racial bias and subjugation. As the military, we were privileged to experience the unnerving greatness and charisma that former President Mandela exuded when he charmed senior leaders of our newly integrated South African National Defence Force, who hailed from opposite camps of the struggle for liberation into working together and forging a united National Defence Force to serve the entire South African nation. Our nation owes its relative peace to our first Commander-in-Chief, Nelson Mandela, who intervened and convinced our military leaders that there was greater reward in forging together instead of taking up arms against one another. He famously declared that, I quote, "In countries where innocent people are dying, the leaders are following their blood instead of their brains," close quote. On 15 December 2013, as we laid this dawn of our struggle, that is the 15th of December 2013, as we laid this dawn of our struggle to his final resting peace, in peace with his ancestors, the South African Army artillery cannons executed 21 gun salute in his honor, and each blast carried a historic significance to us in the military, as it reminded us that each of those artillery rounds would have easily fallen on innocent South Africans and caused mayhem had Dr. Mandela not mediated for peace during the volatile days in our history and averted a potentially bloody civil war. It is for that reason we espouse the values that Mandela stood for, as they form a firm base from which our nation is anchored. In the South African National Defence Force, Mandela taught us to embrace the civil control of the military as enshrined in our Constitution, and encouraged us to understand the role that the military fulfills in a democracy, and never to interfere with lawmakers as they go about implementing the will of the people of South Africa. He taught us not to be politicians in uniform, as that would compromise our standing in society as defenders of our democracy and its people, regardless of race or creed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in our hands now. Let us put all hands on the deck together as South Africans, remain vigilant and guard against racial polarization, a social ill that Mandela detested. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Feldman. I think it's also important for people to know that the gun carriage will be here, and the driver who drove Madiba's body will also be here to explain the mechanics of how it works. So you're welcome to come through and listen to him as he explains that. One of the organizations that we worked with through this period, and in fact we were contemplating on a project that would talk about the future, was AVAS. AVAS has been a great partner of the foundation in terms of making sure that we could capture people's messages and sentiments, both in South Africa and the world. So I'd like to, at this point, call on Ms. Judy Lilliard to come and say a few words.
Thank you very much. Dumelang ditsala, dumelang baholo. Nelson Mandela literally changed the world. He gave us hope to conquer despair. He showed that love can defeat hate, and he taught us to forgive instead of seeking retribution. He's one man among many who made extraordinary impact in a world where all the odds were stacked against him. He exemplifies the very ideals that AVAS, a civic community of 40 million people from all over the world, works for. That every person should live free from persecution, to build a world that we can all be proud to call home. Darkness still exists and hate still threatens triumph, which is why we now need more than ever to live his legacy, a legacy that has traveled to every corner of the world. Part of the exhibition you will see here today is the expression of gratitude for Nelson Mandela's life and work, which hundreds of people visited on Vilakazi Street, and thousands of messages were sent to AVAS from across the planet. And there is no better way to express their gratitude than in the words of the very people who wrote them on the day he passed, and I quote, "You taught me not to be afraid to talk about and fight against racism and injustice in the whole of my free life." That was Mary from the United Kingdom. Nina from Switzerland says, "Thank you for having brought light to the world. Thank you for the change. We will honor you by continuing your work." And Catriona from the UK said, "Nelson Mandela, you taught us great forgiveness, where forgiveness was considered impossible for crimes that were committed. You will always live on in the world. Even though you may never talk to us again, your legacy is a part of you that will never be forgotten." And a message from Spain, "Thank you so much, Nelson Mandela, for bringing so much hope and knowledge to the people when the world needed a leader." And Kalavena from Singapore says, you exemplified courage and wisdom for me. You taught us that forgiveness is possible, and that is a true sign of strength of character. You were the leader we loved to follow." And finally, from South Africa's Tembiso Mapingana says, "Go well, my father. Go well, my comrade. Go well, real fighter. Go well, peacemaker. Go well, world leader." On behalf of the AVAS community, thank you to the Nelson Mandela Foundation for hosting the love and appreciation and honor that Madiba had in this place. we will keep shining the light we brought to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to, at this point, as I call on Prof, do the acknowledgement of the people who are here present who have been supportive of us. I'd like to, at this point, acknowledge and thank Mrs. Machel, Mrs. Ndilega, for coming through, and the rest of the Mandela family here present. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, ably led by Professor Njabulo Ndebele, Mr. Ahmed Kathrada, Dr. Mampela Rampele, Ms. Irene Manel, Dr. Futim Toba, Tate Silomoloko, Tate Tokyo Sekwale, and the committee members who make it possible, Tate President Motlante, and people who are sitting also on our committees, Maya Makenji, Professor Carolyn Hamilton, Yolanda Kuba, Nale Bosman, and Lwazi Bam. I'd like to also at this point thank and acknowledge the hard work of the team of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, as I call on Prof. Njabulo Ndebele to come and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Silo. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests, and Minister Naledi Pandor. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And let me start by thanking the CEO of EDGON, Mr. Jürgen Schreiber. Your contribution will help us preserve their legacy through this, the archive. And it fascinates me that we have the center, the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory, and today, this evening, is indeed about memory. And it's indicative of the fact that memory is not something far away in the past, that in fact it is a living thing, and that we make the future as we remember the past in a very active kind of way. And as I've been thinking about the proceedings this evening, and the material, the archival material that was going to be handed over, I found myself reflecting on the significance of this very auditorium in which we are, particularly at the moment of the first anniversary of our founder's passing. Madiba used this room frequently between the years 2002 and 2008. And it was here that in June 2004, he addressed a press conference and told the world that it was time for him to retire from retirement. And don't call me, I'll call you, you will recall. Of course, it took him 6 years to finally step away from public life. But that moment inaugurated an organizational process framed by the question, what will our purpose be when Madiba is gone? Also in 2004 in this room, Madiba received 2 of his prison notebooks from a former security policeman. They had been removed from his Robben Island cell in 1971, and it was on that day that Madiba launched the Foundation's Center of Memory project. In 2008, he presided over a ceremony here during which the Rivonia trial prosecution records were returned to the state. Also in 2008, he and Ma Albertina Sisulu met with school children who had won prizes in the competition the foundation had mounted with the Department of Basic Education to mark the 90th birthdays of the 2 veterans. It was also in this room where Madiba left on the 18th of November 2010. He was hosting a delegation, and little did we know that as he left, going out of that door, it was the last we saw him in this building, and his health took a knock. I could go on and on, but I think you get the point. Before Madiba stepped away, he gave this organization a very specific mandate to promote his legacy by contributing to the realization of social justice through memory and dialogue work. And you will not be surprised to hear that Madiba's mandate had a particular focus. He didn't want us to do work that would be easy for us and comfortable. He didn't want us to do iconographic memory work. He didn't want us to just convene talk shops. Our mandate is to do the difficult memory work that arguably is only just beginning in our country, and to convene the difficult dialogues which bring together people who actually don't want to listen to one another. Madiba's legacy then is not something that we hold, that we preserve. His legacy ultimately is the future that all of us are making, if we are to make the kind of future Madiba dreamed of and gave so much for. Then all of us have much work to do, much of it difficult work. And it is no small thing to ponder a little bit about institutions, because I'm remembering one of the things that sayings attributed to him, that a saint is a sinner who keeps on trying. And Madiba comes across as an example of someone who did not afraid to own up to his weaknesses in public. And each time a person of stature does that, those weaknesses become a part and parcel of his strength. Now, institutions, therefore, I like to think, are there to prop us up, because we are sinners who keep trying. And so when institutions are created, they bind us to agreements that all of us agree this is how we are going to relate and behave to one another from now on, from the point at which we are bound by these agreements. And so whenever we weaken and totter, we remind ourselves that which brought us together. And if we forget, the institution will go down, and we will go down. And it is not only families, it's not only the big institutions, it's families as well. It's the public civil service. It's private institutions in the private sector. It's NGOs. It's everything where people come together and they say, we are putting together this institution, and by the rules of that institution, this is how we are going to govern one another. I think that is the biggest message that we could remember today, that institutions are all we have got to keep together and standing on our feet. And how those institutions are run is everything we have got. And so it is fitting to remember that Madiba represented all that. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Minister Naledi Pandor. She comes as an old friend of the foundations. She knows this room very well, and in her many portfolios over the years, she has promoted and enabled partnerships between the foundation and government. And she is one who certainly knows the meaning of difficult work and the strength of institutions. Minister, as always, it is an honor to have you with us, and my pleasure to invite you to come and address us.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you very much, Professor Ndebele. Deputy Chief Justice, Mrs. Marshall, the Mandela family,
Professor Ndebele and trustees of the foundation, and the many, many distinguished guests that are here this evening. Good evening to you all. And if there's anyone who believes I should have mentioned them by name, my apologies, I'm really bad on protocol. But I'm very, very honored to be given the opportunity by the foundation to speak to you this evening. We had hoped the President would be the main speaker, and I was asked to come and speak as he is out of the country. What has been fascinating for me this evening is how difficult it is to stand here and speak a year after we lost our dear President. It's really tough. And as I was sitting down there, I was thinking, how did I get here? Why did I agree to this? Will I be able to do it? I think as we remember President Mandela a year after his passing, we've realized as South Africans that we cannot solely claim him as our own in the face of the global acclamation of his contribution to the world as a politician and as a person. And I really would like us not to forget the human character of Mr. Mandela, the person. He had a wonderful sense of humor. And I haven't heard a single person tell a joke as yet. But in the room with him would always be laughter. That's one of the things I remember about him. So when we remember him, as we are solemn and serious, let's also have a sense of lightness, because I think that's what he would want from us. I thought this evening what I would try to do is to perhaps recall Mr. Mandela by reflecting on the words of others and what they might mean to us. As we think of him as a global leader, I recall the words of President Obama, who said, "To the people of South Africa, people of every race and walk of life, the world thanks you for sharing Nelson Mandela with us. His struggle was your struggle. His triumph was your triumph. Your dignity and hope found expression in his life. And your freedom, your democracy, is his cherished legacy. But claim him we must. He laid the foundation for a new society in South Africa, one that can be free of the racial divisions of the past and full of hope for the future. It is still an aspiration, but he believed in this possibility. This prized inheritance, this legacy we're celebrating today, is one that each of us has a duty to nurture and support into maturity. I have seen today some lamentations in the print media about how we are responding to the legacy of President Mandela. But I think rather than bemoan our inadequacies, we should be asking ourselves, how much have I done to make the legacy live? Not I have failed Mandela, because he didn't ask you to do anything. He lived a life you should follow. He lived an example you should try to emulate. So I think let's not lament. Let us seek to replicate. The visual tribute that we will see reflects the key values of President Mandela's life and work. Values of respect, reconciliation, and dignity. These are not the values that Madiba proclaimed from the rooftops. They are values that we can discern in his life. He didn't need to talk about them. We saw them as he took steps in his life. We saw them in his personal conduct. We saw them in his work. I think one of the greatest attributes of President Mandela was his avoidance of pulpit-type moral lectures or pious postures. To him, example was probably the best teacher. As the famous song says, Asimbonanga uMandela until we do what he does. President Mandela understood that patterns of behavior are not accidental products of nature, but are acquired through social interaction and nurturing. As he observed famously, one of the most powerful ways of children and young adults acquiring values is to see individuals they admire and respect exemplify those values in their own being and conduct. Parents and educators, or politicians, or priests who say one thing and do another send mixed messages to those in their charge, who then learn not to trust them. The question of leadership, he concluded, is therefore of vital importance. I suppose, listening to those words, the most important question we have to answer, as those leaders and adults he referred to, is why are we failing to be that example? And how might we all do better? I'm convinced that President Mandela will always be known as a leader who played a key role through sacrifice, struggle, and commitment in the fight against apartheid. Saying that about him, the individual, I also know he'd be very uncomfortable, because he always spoke of the collective, that it was never the man on his own, it was the man with many others. But I believe the role that he played and his individual contribution with the collective has to be recognized. He said on his release from prison, I stand here before you, not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. Your tireless and heroic sacrifices have made it possible for me to be here today. I therefore place the remaining years of my life in your hands. I remember those words and the moment vividly as I was there in Green Market, in the Grand Parade in Cape Town, as he said those words. And I have to say to those of us standing there, I think as the crowd, we were expecting him to tell us how the struggle will continue. And here he was saying, I place myself as a humble servant in your service. What a man. He is the leader who chose reconciliation over revenge. He is a leader whose moral courage defined our era of liberation, so much so that our history books will certainly define the period of our early freedom as the age of Mandela. One of the fascinating attributes he had was that of leading without bitterness. He was absolutely willing to reconcile. Some say almost to a fault, but it was absolutely necessary. He put South Africa and its people first. In President Clinton's words, he taught us the freedom of forgiveness and the power of humility. President Mandela laid a very strong foundation for democratic South Africa, a foundation laid through forgiveness, persuasion, and great love for all the people. Yet, this also exemplified great selfless leadership. He said of his commitment to the struggle against apartheid and for freedom, "We all did so, not for any personal gain or material rewards. We took this stand because these were goals we saw as worthy and virtuous." So I think as we remember him today, we need to be careful when we extol him of making him a badge of pride and virtue, because I don't think that was ever his desire, just to be held up as a badge, which then actually causes some of us to believe by holding up the badge, we are Mandela. That's not what he wanted. What I believe he sought was that our conduct would try in some way to reflect the man. He also reminded us that he himself was not a saint, and he would often say this: we need to use the material that is being presented to us today and that we've had access to for the past few years to study his life and work critically. I think he would expect us to do a critical analysis of his contribution, to interrogate some of the steps that he took. The Black American academic Cornel West reminded us in his 2006 lecture that we should not make Nelson Mandela some kind of icon on a pedestal belonging to a museum. He described President Mandela as a wave in an ocean, part of a rich tradition that raises certain kinds of questions, beginning with our own lives and our willingness to muster the courage to examine who we are as humans. I was talking to a university conference this morning, and we were talking about values and what the role of higher education might be in shaping a new society. And I said to my colleagues that if out of institutions that are the repository of the intellectual wealth of our society, if out of them emerge young people who are 22 years old and who choose to attack a poor African woman walking on a street merely because of her color or her poverty, we have to ask ourselves, what values are our universities transmitting to young people? What kind of person are we producing? It's not a question about our curriculum practice. It's not a question about our academic intention. It's a question about whether our institutions can produce a young person who is very different from those of us who might have lived under a racist system. I think my colleagues were a bit unhappy with my comments because I got a lot of very hard questions after my input. But I do think we have to begin to ask ourselves whether we are examining ourselves and our practice and what it is we're creating in our society. Of course, President Mandela was born in and of the struggle. He once famously proclaimed a phrase all of us are familiar with: the struggle is my life. He was the product of the liberation movement, tempered by a culture of criticism and dialogue, and hardened by the responsibilities of the movement and the accountability of leadership. We recall Oliver Tambo writing to him when it became clear to those in exile that President Mandela had initiated contact with the National Party in the midst of the turbulent 1980s. Oliver Tambo demanded, "You are answerable, Nelson. We want to know what your reasons are for talking with the Boers. But we know that that foundation led us to the peace and reconciliation we enjoy today. It is this tradition of openness, of debate and dialogue that produced the likes of Oliver Tambo, Chief Albert Lutuli, Lillian Ngoyi, Ruth First, Helen Suzman, Walter Sisulu, Albertina Sisulu, and so many others who have served our movement and our nation. The accolades that I believe will form part of the forever living archive of Mr. Mandela must be preserved, as the foundation is doing, as a vibrant social history of the human politics of South Africa. Intellectuals with creative imagination must be asked to devise ways of infusing these materials into multidisciplinary discourse in education at all levels. We should explore how a primary schooler would describe Mr. Mandela and carry that description to a new and higher phase of learning for all young people in our society. We should use these materials so that we do not, in 20 years' time, have a 40-year-old who is racist when he was born in 1994. It just would not make any sense and would not be a fitting tribute to this great man. I thank you very much.
I think, Minister, it's fitting to say that deserves an when you started, Minister, you asked, you said something that I thought you would live up to. You said, I haven't heard anyone say a joke all night. And I thought your speech will be riddled with jokes. But in fact, you then made us realize, you gave us a serious talking to. And I hope that we heard and the world heard your talk. And you're reminding me, Minister, that, and reminding all of us, that a question that's usually asked is, are you worried that Nelson Mandela's legacy will one day disappear? And the response to that, must be twofold. That it's a yes and no. No, we're not worried because this legacy is not owned by one person. It's not owned by one institution, nor is it owned by one country. It's owned by the universe. But that we should also say, yes, we are worried because our tolerance for racism, our tolerance for mediocrity at all levels in institutions, as Prof said, our tolerance for xenophobia, homophobia, religious intolerance is something that we should worry us, that our children's children, those ghosts of the future to whom we owe this legacy, will not find it. So in other words, I think your speech told us that we cannot relax. We have to do something of it. But you also said, this legacy you never receive, you must make it. So I hope we heard you as you said that. Thank you very much again. As we come to the end of the program, I'd like to just go through some of the parts of the program that we'll be doing for the rest of the week. I'd like to just note that the Nelson Mandela Foundation Center of Memory will be open every day, weekdays and weekends, from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And this will be used, we hope that you can use this to reflect on and experience Madiba's legacy. So the exhibitions that are outside and the public tribute, including the military vehicle that's there, will remain there. I'd also like to remind you that we have launched a digital hub where you can put up your thoughts, which is Madiba's image. You can populate it with your messages. And that's found on the nelsonmandela.org website. On the 5th of December, which is tomorrow, the South African government, led by the presidency and supported by the Department of Social Development, will have commemorative events in Pretoria, starting at 4 o'clock with an interfaith prayer service, and then followed by a wreath-laying service with the veterans at the Union Buildings between 8 and 9 o'clock. We'll then move to the Freedom Park for a 9 o'clock event, an event that starts at 9. Of course, between that, there will be a moment of silence at 10 o'clock. I'd also like to remind you that at 3 o'clock tomorrow, there will be the Mandela Legacy Cup, which pays tribute to Madiba through sport. And this is a game between the Proteas and the Springboks. So this will be at the Wanderers Stadium. I'd like to also remind you that on the 6th of December, here in this building, 9:30 to 12:30, the chairman of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Ntate Njabulo Ndebele, will be hosting artists in tribute to Nelson Mandela. This will include poets, writers, performers, musicians, who would then have an open session in this building. On the 7th of December, we're going to have bikers for Mandela who will be doing a big roar for Madiba. So that will be them they will also be doing a literacy run in the process, collecting books. That will be here on the 7th in the morning. On the 12th, we're going to have to respond to the minister's question about comedy. We're going to have comedians in tribute to Madiba here in this building at 5 o'clock to 7:30. And then on the 13th, we have the Nelson Mandela Remembrance Walk in Pretoria. On the 14th, we have the inaugural Tshwane City Marathon called The Last Mile. And to close, in terms of the formalities, I'd like to remind you of Madiba's words when he said, and I quote, "When a man has done what he considers to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest in peace. I believe I've made that effort, and that is therefore why I will sleep for the eternity." And I think it's important that as we remember Madiba, we do not reminisce about the past, as the minister said, but we talk about how we build the future. I'd like to, at this point, invite the Soweto Opera Quattro to come and serenade us with some music before we then have another group called Horizon Duo, who will then play until 8 o'clock.
Wash away the thoughts inside that keep my mind away from you. No more love and no more pride. My thoughts are all I have to do. I remain. Sibuye ekhaya, sinemithwalo. Jesu brandana sibuye ekhaya. Tis for you that will not die. running down.
Thank you.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burden be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank you so much. They will give us one more song as I ask that we all remain seated. If I can plead with you to please remain seated as I ask Mrs. Machel and the Mandela family plus the minister and the guests in front as they leave. So I'm going to ask that we please remain seated as they leave.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The further you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter what's there, something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, but treat me wrong, so wrong. You thought my pride was gone, oh no. There's something inside so strong, oh, something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of territory. You lie to control me. Deny my place in time to swallow wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you. Because there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, but treat me wrong, so wrong. You thought my pride was gone, oh no. There's something inside so strong, oh, something inside so strong. Rather than sister, it's just not good enough. Rather than sister, we gotta do it anyway. We gotta do it anyway. We gotta do it anyway. Something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. They treat me wrong, so wrong. You thought my pride was gone. Oh no. There's something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. Something inside so strong.
Thank you. Thank you.